Well, good evening, everybody, from a setting sun here in the Scottish borders. It's been quite a pleasant day, though. Thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon's chat with Tracy and Mark and Dr. Silkman. However, I must admit, we will get back to the looking at Brendan Dass's appeals process very soon. Excuse me, but I wanted to do that live chat with Tracy and Mark and Dr. Silkman. Wanted to get that done for a while now. But also the last, I think it came out, was it Thursday or Friday? I can't remember when Fear City actually came out. High Millbilly. It came out very recently anyway, within the last couple of days. And I must confess, I have watched it 3 times. And no, that isn't just to check to see if there's anybody featured in Fear City, with the surname Capaldi. I doubt there will be. The Capaldis come from a different part of Italy than the Mafia from Sicily. Although that doesn't actually mean very much, because obviously you can marry into families. But anyway, as I say, I've watched it 3 times. It's not very long. It's 3 episodes, 45 minutes, then an hour. So 2.5 hours, well worth watching as far as I'm concerned. I will go through a couple of reasons why I think it's worth watching later on. But let's have a look at some of the reviews. One from either side, and let's see what they say about it. Should be interesting. Let's have a look. Let's see what review number 1 here comes from. I better just make sure that everything's working as it should do before I go crashing on into the text here of this article from Vox, and just make sure that everything is working as it should be. Hi, I noticed Sharon there was also in the chat. Hi, Sharon. Here we go then. This is an article from Vox, from Alyssa Wilkinson. How Netflix's new Mafia documentary failed. Okay, let's have a look. An archival FBI surveillance image from Fear City, New York versus the Mafia. Let's come down, bring that down. Let's have a quick look. Let's go the other way. Let's have a quick look at that evidence. Okay. Let's see, what do we say? What does it say here? Rudy Giuliani, wearing a navy suit with a flag pinned to its lapel, sits in a glossy conference room talking to a camera. I was a tough kid. I was a boxer. I was taught not to be afraid of anything, he says. Could I have been a wise guy? Sure, I could have. But in the 70s, I became an assistant U.S. attorney. Surprisingly, he's not in a campaign ad. Giuliani is a major and exalted figure in Sam Hopkinson's Fear City, New York versus the Mafia, a new 3-episode documentary series on Netflix. Of course he is. Giuliani, after all, had a large role in the legal strategy that helped law enforcement break the stranglehold that 5 major Mafia families had on the economy and culture of New York in the 1980s. It would be weird to make a documentary about the era without including him in it. But Rudy Giuliani, circa 2020, is not the same cultural figure he was back then. Nor is, for that matter, Donald Trump, whose connections to the mob in that era and apparent adoption of mob-like tactics are no secret. Fear City, a true crime tale for the law and order crowd, laced with nostalgia for the good old days, pulls off some wild feats of lazy filmmaking in its storytelling, and the wildest of them all might be an almost complete absence of any acknowledgement that the past is barely in the past when it comes to this topic. Imagine making a documentary in 2020 about New York City, the Mafia, and the 70s and 80s with only the thinnest possible reference to the current President of the United States, who, whatever you think of him, is a thoroughly relevant character. The thin reference in this series comes at the beginning of the third episode, when someone says that if you were a real estate developer in New York in the 1980s, you had to deal with the mob. Fear City shows a few images of Trump while mentioning Trump Tower as a major development from a major developer, and plays a bit of a tape where a mobster mentions him. Okay, but how did Trump deal with the mob? To what extent? Were his actions criminal? Don't hold out for an answer. Fear City has already moved on. Or contemplate the decision-making that goes into including Giuliani, Trump's future lawyer, as a pervasive presence and primary subject, alongside the New York attorneys and FBI agents he worked with, nearly all of whom are interviewed in similarly glossy settings, with everyone giving uninterrogated accounts as the film's most reliable narrators. The more colourful former mobsters' voices, mostly guys who did time or become state's witnesses, become less significant once Giuliani and co. enter the picture. A working title for Fear City could well have been How Rudy Saved New York City from the Bad Guys, and That's Why Law Enforcement is Good. I had to scan the credits to confirm the series wasn't funded by the Department of Justice. Okay. Others can better speak than I to the historical veracity of Fear City. Was RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the congressional act that gave law enforcement the ammunition they needed to finally indict mob bosses, as unambiguously good as the film make it seem? How well does the way that former mobsters and FBI agents characterize those years of cat and mousing each other hold up against history? I have no idea, but its lack of voices outside of those directly involved in the cases leaves me skeptical. Michael Franzese, who was a member of the Colombo crime family. I'm not here to quibble with Fear City on the level of facts, though, or even politics. Okay, what struck me was how bad it is as a documentary. Fear City is shallow, toothless, and dull. It's a boring choice to tell a story like this from the point of view of the FBI agents. Their perspective is well trodden in TV and movies. And New York's relationship to the mob is not exactly hidden history. It's also crushingly dull to adopt the official narrative about what New York was like back then as the film's de facto worldview proposed in, unfortunately punctuated, on-screen text at the start of the first episode. 1970s New York, a lawless city plagued by drugs, violence and murder. That's not entirely wrong, of course. New York was in a rough shape in the 1970s and nearly bankrupt. But if there was anything else going on in New York at the time, you wouldn't know it from Fear City, which provides little, if any, context, nor would you know how ordinary New Yorkers were really affected by the state of things, except through the words of the mobsters and the FBI agents interviewed in the film. There's plenty of talk of the Mafia's control over unions, but no former union workers appear to talk about it. We hear stories about grocery store owners being exploited, but never hear from the actual grocery store owners. And women don't seem to exist at all in this world at all. Very few women speak throughout the entire series. The most interesting female voice is former FBI agent Charlotte Lang, who was the sole woman agent on the mob busting team, and she only appears halfway through the third episode. Fear City would have been more compelling if it had reoriented itself around her. What we get with Fear City isn't New York versus the Mafia. As the subtitle promises, it's the FBI and the district attorney's office versus the mafia, which boils down to a lot of talking about the specific ways bosses got bugged and doesn't offer much more of a sense of how New York was caught up in it all. But the worst sin Fear City may commit is being, wait for it, tedious. Something as pulpy and cinematic as cops chasing criminals should be loaded with juicy stories. Fear City somehow manages to both be far too simplistic and utterly lost in its own weeds. Watching it made me feel like an interloper in a conversation a bunch of guys were having as they relived their glory days to one another, only to realize 10 minutes in that none of them were particularly good storytellers. The film spends a lot of time talking about bugging the mafia, which is interesting enough at first, but then it goes on and on and on. And just when you think it's finally moving on to a new topic, it goes back. Documentarians can only work with the facts they have available, of course, but they make choices, just like other filmmakers, about what goes into their film and what doesn't. They pick the voices they believe are important and leave out the ones that don't matter, and they adopt narratives and choose which facts to use to tell the story. The story told in Fear City is ultimately about heroic law enforcement and attorneys pursuing the mafia. It's also about how glamorous and fun it was to be in the mafia. Drinking champagne comes up frequently. It is emphatically not about what factors led to organized criminals becoming so powerful in New York. It's not about what kind of men were attracted to the mob and why, nor is it interested in the ethics of spying on civilians suspected of criminal activity, or curious about why women were so consistently sidelined, a question mob movie godfather Martin Scorsese explored just last year in his film The Irishman, which I have watched. It was very good. It is also glancingly concerned with why someone, like, say, Rudy Giuliani, would decide not to be a wise guy and instead become an attorney. In part, it seems he and others hated what the mafia had done to Italian American communities, which would have been another great thing to tug on. Fear City is not about why this particular Fear City is also not about why this particular moment in history matters, other than its potential for entertainment value. If you are very interested in the mechanics of placing a bug or the construction of legal strategies, but you don't tell a story like this for no reason. At the end of Fear City, the film half-heartedly notes where some of its interviewees landed: jail and state witnesses status for the mob guys, mayor of New York for Giuliani, no note of the other agents and lawyers. Then it turns ominous. The last scene is archival footage of a newscaster wrapping up the story by saying, who will the next generation of bosses be, and what kind of shadowy crime games will they play? The footage cuts to a shot of Lower Manhattan with the Twin Towers prominent. We go to the credits. You can't take away any number of messages from that directorial choice, but Occam's razor suggests it's a link between what we all know happened to the Twin Towers and how Giuliani brought down the mafia. Giuliani has long made political issue of his governance during 9/11 and its aftermath, particularly since becoming President Trump's attorney in 2018, something Fear City does not mention at all. Again, seems relevant. No matter, the link is established. Fear City plays best as an extended attempt to remind us that the good guys were the good guys and Giuliani was the smartest guy in the room, no matter what he's up to these days. It's not interested in how the mafia's presence in New York shaped the city's future or what the events of the past reveal about the twisted present. It's not interested in New York. It's a reinforcement of accepted ideas, not a probing of history. Sure, there's a place in the world for uncomplicated nostalgia for the old days, but it should never be as vapid or dull as Fear City. Okay, let's sorry about the slip into that. I didn't realize it was going to go and do that. So let's have another opinion. Now that was from Vox and it said New York. This is the Radio Times, which I'm sure most of you know is a it's from the BBC. And this is an article by Helen Daly. Fear City Review. Netflix's slick and stylish doc is more than a gripping real-life version of The Wire. Says Helen Daly. Here we see, obviously, the boss of bosses. What was his name again? Can't remember. Oh, that was like it's Paul Sell something Paul. Everybody called him Paulie. Okay, let's hear what Helen Daly has to say. There's something incredibly gripping about stories of the mafia. Look at the success of gangsters in pop culture, and you'll see we positively love them. The likes of The Godfather, Goodfellas, and Peaky Blinders, absolutely Peaky Blinders, set the precedent for gritty, hard-hitting, and captivating stories. Only last year, Netflix made their way into the mob world with The Irishman, which was an excellent film, I must admit. Now they've combined this apparent passion for the mafia with their skill for producing slick and fascinating documentaries with Fear City, New York versus the Mafia. I didn't realize this. The documentary, which is from the filmmakers of Don't F with Cats, which is an absolutely superb documentary, well worth watching, centers itself on the FBI mission to shut down the 5 families of New York City in the 1970s and 80s. Then mobsters ruled the entirety of the Big Apple for years, but in particular, those 2 decades were the peak of the Italian-American dynasties. The tense 3-parter starts with the FBI looking well behind the times, struggling to even arrest just the soldiers, let alone the bosses or the underbosses of huge criminal families. But that all changed with the RICO theory. Professor G. Robert Blakey lectures on the theory in Cornell University and instructed the FBI to consider each family as an organization. Get the boss. You'd have to close the business down. To get the boss, you have to close the business down. Thus, 5 forces were established to try and take down the 5 families, all at the same time, the result of which became the real-life version of The Wire. And the documentary is just as slick as the renowned HBO series. Intercut with unseen FBI footage, the series follows a tight timeline where we meet different cops from across the operation and learn about their in-depth experience on the case. At one point, we even see footage of the black bag man fitting a phone bug in a Gambino captain's house while the target hovers around him ominously. The quite literal riot references don't just stop there. Fear City even goes so far as to have a catchy theme tune, Hard Times by Baby Hewitt and the Babysitters, to be precise. We see the FBI putting The Wire's surveillance tactics into action. Though, of course, one must remind oneself that this came before the HBO series. Throughout the course of the 3-part series, you quickly realize that the organized crime going on in New York City goes way beyond one family. Get the commission and crumble. the whole gang. And that's just what Rudy Giuliani did. Fear City is very much a hero's tale. Gone are the glamorous rapscallions from Peaky Blinders, who always seem to come out on top. Enter the investigators who tried every trick under the sun to put an end to the reign of terror looming over New York City. What could be a same old police procedural? Fear City puts the viewer directly in the heart of the case, examining photographs, video footage, and wire recordings that feel very present and give the illusion you're on the case. It's all very riveting and exciting, thinking you're on to the biggest case New York has ever faced. Anyone with a mild interest in the Mafia will find this essential viewing, but it's also another excellent Netflix documentary following a line of successful wins for the streaming giant. What's more impressive is Netflix's ability to capture a taste you didn't know you had for a theme, delve right into the depths of the topic, and leaves you with a fully whetted appetite. Fear City has water cooler written all over it. It's just a shame we can't gather round one for a good old gossip on Cosa Nostra. And I think, yep, that's about it. So, personally, I would definitely recommend watching it, only to see if you agree with either of those articles. It's referenced in the first article that they make the point that the I would have to give a great deal of credit to the FBI and the police and everybody who had a hand in taking down the Mafia, because jokingly, when I said to Eunice about watching it, she said there aren't any Capaldis mentioned, aren't there? Are there? And I said no. There's no mention of us. We're a different part of Italy, But it's, joking aside, it is a huge stain on this, if you like, Italian culture. We can joke about the Mafia, yes, but that they were and I think they still are. This is just series 1, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Really looking forward to further episodes about the Mafia. So anyway, please do check it out. See what you make of it. As I say, I was very, very impressed. Wanted to watch it 2 or 3 times. I thought it was excellent. I thought the one lady that was in the FBI, they interviewed her. They made a point of getting hold of her, but when you realise how many agents were involved, I thought it was very good to listen to some of the ex Mafia soldiers as they were. I thought it was excellent. I can't criticize it. Yes, they could have gone off on tangents as to what Donald Trump knew about the Mafia and the connections. That's basically hearsay, though, isn't it? Anyway, watch it. Let me know what you think. And I suppose in doing so, you will either agree with, let me just show you these two again. The 2 articles that we went through were Fear City from, I think it's the Vox, from Alyssa Wilkinson. She seemed to be critical of Netflix, possibly. And obviously the Radio Times with their correspondent Helen Daly. So yeah, please do. I'll leave the link to both of these in the description. Let me know what you think, and we'll catch you all again soon. As soon as now, I am getting very close to my limit, which won't be streaming limit. Won't be renewed until the 1st of August, and I've got a live coming up Tuesday. So I might be struggling to do the next part of the Brendan Dassey appeals process until next month, which isn't that far away. On this coming Tuesday, musically, I'm hoping to chat with one of the best fiddlers in Scotland and Northumberland. I'm lucky enough to have him come along and play a few gigs with me, so looking forward to that. Catch you then if you're around. If not, you can always catch up later. Okay. Well, enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll catch you all again either Tuesday or beginning of the month, probably. If I've got enough time left to do something in between, then I certainly will do. Okay. Cheers. Thank you for joining. Bye for now.